We're bringing our guest, joined now by author and broadcaster Emma Woolf, and also former Labour advisor Matthew Laza to discuss this.
Let's ask Matthew Laza first of all, because Simon Janchuk was here. You know Simon very well from Labour MP.
I first met Simon when I was at school, Andrew, but at a young socialist training event.
Very good, very
showing
good.
My age.
You're showing your age. But he said this is great for Labour.
Yeah, I think it is. I think Simon's absolutely right. I think the Cameron appointment is extraordinary because it plays right into the hands of those who think that A, Rishi is out of touch, but B, that he doesn't stick to what he said. How many weeks ago is it that we were told he was the change candidate?
And he's brought
and yet
back.
He's brought back. He's this blast from the past. And I was just thinking, you know, oh, is this a clever masterstroke? Some of the people around Rishi will be thinking it is, like when Gordon Brown brought Peter Mandelson back from Brussels.
Right.
But that was very different because Peter represented, in a sense, the Blairite faction, and that was all about uniting the Blairites and the Brownites, ending the wars of the TBs and the GBs. Cameron doesn't represent any faction, because if you're pro-European, you're pretty mad at Cameron for how he totally mishandled the referendum, and if you're a Brexiteer, well, you're on a different side of the argument anyway.
But you could argue also, Matthew, he's a class act. He won 2 elections, more than your lot have done for a very, very long time.
Well, he was one and a half.
Yeah, he won in a hung parliament, and then he won with a clear majority.
Absolutely.
If the referendum had gone the other way, he could have been Prime Minister for a very long time.
Absolutely, but it didn't, and I think that's the big... I mean, I think it was such a miscalculation, and also that he scarpered the scene.
That was terrible.
There's a lot of people still bitter that he scarpered the scene in a sense. They ended up with Theresa May, and, you know, we know what's followed since as a consequence of him departing so quickly. The other thing is he did have all this issue with this guy that he worked for, this financier Lex Greensill. I wonder if your colleagues on Fleet Street have got things tucked away that they may be pressing publish on about that.
He did himself huge damage. Just to remind people, he was lobbying government ministers, including Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, on behalf of a company which subsequently went bust.
Absolutely, yes.
Having had the guy, Greensill, in the Cabinet Office when he was Prime Minister, which looked like he was
he'd given him an appointment, hadn't he?
Warming him up for when he left Number 10, so that will all come. Emma, what do you think? David Cameron. We're not talking about Suella, are we? So that's something for Cameron.
But I think it comes together.
Sunak.
I think Braverman out and Cameron in is angering a lot on the right. There are so many Brexiteers texting me this morning going, that's it, voting reform. Because instinctively, of course she's mishandled the past week. It wasn't done, whether you agree with her or not, it wasn't done the way a Home Secretary should have done it. But many instinctively agreed with Suella Braverman. Now they have David Cameron coming back. People are, you know, and this should have been Sunak's moment. This should have been his moment of finally looking a bit like a leader, making decisions. And instead, as Matthew said, as Simon has said, this is going to play really well for Keir Starmer.
So has he misread, Rishi Sunak, that David Cameron is viewed by the majority of people as being part of the West London liberal elite?
Yes, indeed.
Notting Hill.
Very socially progressive, probably rather broad-minded about immigration. He always was. And so it's going to backfire on him if what he wanted to do is to bring over people who might be voting for reform or Labour.
I think there's absolutely no doubt that Sunak is now on borrowed time. I don't think anyone can see him carrying on after this.
Who does he appeal to then? Who does he think David Cameron? Because I was saying maybe it's those Conservative voters who liked him because he wasn't particularly controversial and they see him as a fairly safe pair of hands back in government, a grown-up.
That middle ground who were considering voting Labour, who are instinctively Tory but were considering voting for Sir Keir Starmer.
Yes.
So, yes, he is going to appeal to that, but I think that... obviously, a reshuffle is chaotic by its very nature, but this doesn't look like Rishi Sunak's in charge, really.
Do you agree with that?
Well, I think what's really...
it's a big decision, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, I think there was a story this morning that the Lib Dems were hoping to weaponise Suella if she lingered on against the Tories in the blue wall. Absolutely. And I think that the Cameron, rather than me, looks like Sunak's given up on the red wall and is now literally trying to sort up the blue wall, because Cameron does appeal to those posh seats in the home counties.
That's right.
Sort of Oxfordshire, Berkshire, Surrey belt.
I think there is a sense, if you talk to Red Wall Tory MPs, they pretty much know it's over.
Yeah.
But is that going to be enough, Matthew? Is that
No,
going
I
to
don't
be
think it
enough
will
to get
be.
him over the line?
Absolutely.
Because
No, I
in
don't
other
think it will
news,
be.
Labour are way ahead. Labour are doing brilliantly in the
Yeah.
latest polls.
And the other thing is,
You know?
it seems tone deaf for Sunak, because if you're one of those voters in that blue wall, quite a lot of those people are pro-European.
Yeah.
They've got second homes in Europe,
Yeah.
a large number of them, and they're still not going to forgive Cameron for them mishandling the referendum.
What?
I think if they brought Hague back, actually, I think Christopher mentioned that
Yeah.
Hague's a sort of eminence grise to Sunak. That would have sent out a signal that, yes, I'm bringing back a Liberal Tory, but one who's got wider appeal. Cameron seems to me damaged goods.
What about the democratic idea that we're having a Foreign Secretary operating in the House of Lords? So he can't be challenged by elected MPs?
That does seem to me very strange, and that decision.
And he hasn't
Yes.
been voted in
No,
by any of the electorate
Well,
again.
and people feel this about Sunak already,
Yeah.
that he hasn't been voted in,
Yeah.
that they've been replaced and
Yeah.
replaced. And so I think this is only... People are saying general election now.
Yeah, well, that won't come. But that is going to be what some people are arguing. Where is the
Democracy
here? Because
Where is
elected
our
MPs
Foreign
should be able
Secretary
to
to
challenge.
answer questions
I know.
in the House of
And
Commons?
And we haven't had a Foreign Secretary in the House of Lords since Carrington resigned over the Falklands War. That was 1982. So the change candidate, Matthew, has turned the clock back.
It's
How
dusting
many
down the
years?
ermine.
40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. It doesn't look very modern. It doesn't look very
Well, I'm
future-looking.
thinking of
to stick him in
Anthony
the Lords.
Trollope with the Prime Minister being in the House of Lords and not being in the House of Commons at all.
Well,
The other thing is-
I'm sure he looked very fetching in his early
Oh no,
David Cameron.
the thing about him is he's not even been particularly involved in policy. I mean, there was a story this morning that Tony Blair wants to be the envoy in Gaza. He's not been doing things like he's been helping out at his local food bank.
Please don't let Tony Blair be the
Shepherd's Hut.
envoy
He's
in
been writing his
Gaza.
book in his Shepherd's
He
Hut.
has. Tony Blair, the envoy in Gaza. He was a Middle East peace envoy. He didn't do very well with
Well,
that.
quite, but
did he?
no. I mean, it certainly it didn't make much of a difference. But
It made
he's
no difference.
but he's the FT says that he's acceptable to Netanyahu this morning. But Cameron was just
So that's another former Prime Minister
another former
coming
Prime
back.
Minister coming back, but on an international stage. But do you remember what's going to happen to Cameron's shed? Do you remember when he left? He had this £25,000 shed in his garden.
It will
Maybe
become
it'll
the
go on
place where
eBay.
you put the trash.
But I think the worst thing about that garden shed, it was a gypsy caravan, was the fact that he was photographed. He got it for free, even though it was 20.
Did he?
Didn't he?
As an
Wasn't that
influencer?
the point, didn't he?
And wrote a book that really
And
didn't
wrote
sell.
a book.
Yeah, it's very heavily
and
remade.
I would like to know what Samantha Cameron thinks of this morning, because she didn't really hold back on the fact that she was quite happy when he left.
She
Number One.
was
I
very
spent the
happy,
weekend looking
very
on her
happy.
dresses website, deciding,
did.
because she's done very well.
Yeah.
I decided they're a bit too expensive, actually.
No,
but-
her fashion company hasn't done well.
No,
they
I don't
do
like
well.
it.
They
I don't like
she keeps having to have injections of cash in it. It's very difficult to
It's
make
quite
these.
niche
It
popular.
might be nice clothes, but it's very difficult
Very
to make these
expensive.
labels work.